Good evening, I'm Yuriko, and I just released the greatest album of all time, which even the most cursory of internet searches will corroborate. Okay, so, to really clarify a few things. Firstly, the album was not under Yuriko, it was under Sykeus, which was originally my band, but then people moved away and I couldn't find new players, and so basically now it's just me. I still sort of think of it as a band, but technically it's just a solo project. And I thought it'd be interesting to show you guys kind of how I made it on the production side of things, because it was black metal, and you know, extreme metal genres aren't really that directly related compositionally to orchestral music, so I don't think the composition side of things is actually going to help you. But the mixing and mastering and the processing and how I actually recorded the instruments and what mics and stuff I used, I think that's actually, it doesn't matter what genre you're doing, that can always cross over. I think that'll kind of help you there. I mainly wanted to do this because I did get quite a good reception from the album. Obviously compositionally, but a lot of the things was that people were saying how much they liked the mix of it. And I just want to clarify on that this was black metal. So, black metal is not known for its good mixes, but it's got a rawness in its quality, which is hard to achieve when you get a clean mix. So my mix, I kind of think, like, it's not the cleanest mix, but I think it's enough of a mix between the rawness of the, like, true cult black metal and a clean mix that anyone could enjoy if they like the music. I'll give you a quick example of what true cult black metal sounds like, in case you're unaware. And my album sounds like this. Alright, so, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. Let's get onto the instruments then. So this was my Epiphone Black Beauty Les Paul, and this was used for all of the rhythms, or pretty much all of the rhythms. I'll get to the ones that weren't in a second, and most of the leads. So some of the leads I wanted a bit of a thinner texture. I wanted them to sit on top of the mix, whereas others I wanted to blend into the mix. So the ones that I wanted to blend into the mix, I use the same guitar as the rhythms. And the other ones I use a different guitar, which we'll see in a sec. The thing about this guitar, of why I use it for all the rhythms, because it's not that comfortable to play, honestly. The frets are really small and whatnot. It's a thick neck and stuff, but it sounds so thick, the tone that you get from this. And because the album was all in standard tuning, for those who know anything about metal, standard tuning is not the heaviest of tunings. It's not that you can't be heavy in it, you definitely can. Bands like this, and this, and this, they all use standard tuning, so, you know, you definitely can be very heavy with it, but you've got to do a few things to sort of compensate for the fact that you're not tuning down to double drop E flat. So, alright, that's the guitar that I use for most of the things. This, my Ibanez S series, is my favorite guitar. Favorite instrument of all time, actually. It feels so nice to play, which is why I did it for all the solos. I mean, I literally couldn't have even done the solos on the other ones because I need like 24 frets for a lot of this stuff. I need the tremolo. I don't have the tremolo, but you can see it's a floating bridge. And yeah, for some of the other leads, there is a couple riffs in there that use the tremolo in the riff. So those are the only other times where I use this for the rhythm guitars. But that was literally just that one small excerpt of the song. The rest of it was still with that other guitar because the tone from it is so nice. So, yeah, alright, that's all I want. Sticking with guitars, we had a couple classical guitars, guitar parts, sorry, on it. That's getting so dusty. That's what I used for this one. It's not the best guitar. It's actually quite a bad guitar. It's very old. It's very cheap. I even dropped the headstock. I mean, I jumped onto the headstock one time. I had like a bunk bed and I rolled off and landed on it and cracked it, so I had to like glue it back together, and I had to replace these things and so much stuff. So it's not a nice guitar, but I needed that nylon string sound. Although I didn't even use the nylon strings, but these steel strings on a nylon sound a little different to steel strings on a semi-acoustic. So yeah, it's just a sound sort of thing. This guitar isn't really super important. It really doesn't play a big part in the album, but you know, little things. Alright, this is the final guitar I used. It's a Cort. I don't know if anyone knows anything about model numbers or whatever. I definitely don't. But it's a Cort guitar. It's not bad, but yeah, it's not a bad guitar, but it's not also nice either. But again, I needed that steel string sound for a couple songs. She did use the high strings this time, but yes. So that's the other one. Again, the acoustic guitars didn't play a big part in it. It was mainly the electrics, and it was honestly mainly on that Les Paul. So if anyone hates on you for getting a cheaper brand guitar like Epiphone, I don't know, they're wrong, because that thing sounds awesome. Okay, the final instrument on the album is this Sound Gear Ibanez bass. It's awesome. It feels very similar playing to the S series, but bass guitar basically. It's 5-string because, as I said, I was in standard. So sometimes when I can get down to these low notes, it can really flesh out the sound. It doesn't really make it heavier, but you can feel quite constricted in standard because you're always trying to go low, but you don't have those low notes. So just to be able to extend the range a little bit gives you a bit more freedom compositionally, and like to the listener, it doesn't well, basically not everything's always in parallel. Parallel is where if the guitar moves up, the bass is going to move up as well. This time we can go in contrary motion, which sounds really cool, whereas if one moves up, the other moves down, or the other way around. So because you can do that, it just gives you a bit more stuff. It makes it a bit more interesting to listen to. And again, standard tuning. So if I wanted to go to a D, even an E flat, right, I'd have to go up to here, which is kind of lame because that's almost the note that the guitar plays. So to be able to just come down to there, really handy. Anyway, it sounds amazing. One thing I will mention now, while I've got the bass in my hand, is when I'm playing the bass, and you'll hear this all throughout the album, you have to use fingers for this sound, and you want to slap the string really quickly. Not slap, like go through the string really quickly, and you get this. You hear the transient really loud, but you'll also hear that low note. So I hope that's getting picked up. If not, I'm just gonna, I don't know. That's the sound that was all through the album. So I don't really know too much how this works. I know that these are like EQs and stuff for the guitar. I definitely turned the mids down a little bit, which I don't normally do. But for this sound, I wanted a very clear transient to the high part, and a very thick low part. Because again, we're in standard. This is the only thing that's really going to keep us grounded with that bassy sound. Alright. So this here is the mic I use for vocals. It's an SM. Oh, not SM, sorry. What's it called again? Rode NT2A. It's a Rode NT2A. It's a really nice microphone. It's pretty cheap, relatively. Like I think it's like $500. So it's definitely on the cheaper end of mics, but it sounds really, really nice. As I guess you'll hear. It won't sound as nice me speaking right now because I'm not going to process this. I'm just going to have the raw sound, but at least you'll hear that, I suppose. Okay, this is the amp that I use. So that's the head, the PV XXX. It's the PV XXX Mark II as well. And then this cab, which I'll get the number up for you there. This is an amazing amp. They might have been brushed a little bit as I moved the amp back from the other room, which I was reamping in. But for the most part, that's the I'll think of that word too, that I was using. I did use rhythm and clean. Sorry, rhythm and lead. I didn't use any clean. I think that's basically it. Yeah. So when I was actually recording this, I used this mic, a Shure SM57. It's pretty standard for a metal amp recording. And I've got a fan to show you how it worked. So in here, there's 4 different cabs. You can sort of see one there actually. If I get on that sort of angle, there's 4 different cones. Each of those makes sound, and when you're recording, you want to have the mic on one of those. You don't want to just sit it here and sort of grab it. It's not going to sound good. You want to get up nice and close to them. And you're basically only recording one sound, unless you've got like 4 mics, in which case you can record all of them. But most of us don't have that liberty. So this, I'm going to pretend, is the cone. That would be the center, like most cones do. I'll get up a picture so you can sort of see a comparison. So that's going to be the center, that's going to be the outside, and that's going to actually be the ring around the side. So when you're recording, you don't want to be here or out here. You want to be somewhere from here to here. For the most part, I found that here was the best for me. But it's up to you where you want to go. Every time you turn on the amp, it's going to be a little bit different because it is tubes, so it's not going to be consistent. But for the most part, you can sort of get an idea of where yours is going to be. But yours is going to be different to mine. So, well, sorry, yours isn't going to necessarily be the same as mine. So you've got to kind of work that out yourself. A distance of about like this away from the webbing or whatever this is called is probably where I would have it. But again, test it out, find what works best for you. Last, I guess, little piece, again, doesn't matter too much because it's not going to compare to your amp. They're always going to be different. They might be the same, but doesn't mean that they're going to be the same. I think this was the cone that I used for leads, and that was the cone that I used for rhythms. Or maybe the other way around. But I definitely used the bottom two. I didn't use any of the top ones. It just didn't work out for me. Alright, well, that's everything for outside of the computer. That's all the gear that I used. Now I'm going to show you what I did in here to get a couple of the sounds, my chain processing and whatnot. Okay, so bad news. My computer went through a big old mess up the other day when Windows decided to update. When I was like, please Windows don't update, and then turned off my computer and it was like, gotcha bro, we updating. So I lost everything. So none of these are going to have the actual audio that I had, which is really annoying. But I can still kind of talk about what I did and the processing. You just won't be able to fucking hear it. It's bullshit. So the first thing is drums, because of course I didn't talk about drums before. I used this Studio Drummer. I used a session kit on Metal Mixer, and that's how I sort of mixed everything there. But the important part is that when you're using, and because no one knew that everyone was like, dude, Caleb was insane on this album. And every single time I was like, yeah, Caleb's not in the band. He went to somewhere else. So, and then, as soon as I say that, they'd be like, well, who did it then? Who played drums? Never were they like, oh, so you used sampled drums. Like, it didn't even cross their mind, sort of thing. So there's a few things I did there. The first thing is I humanized everything. So I actually have a logical editor which can humanize for me. I got that one, and then this one which just does a little bit less. But every software has some kind of humanization. It's just so that nothing hits at the exact same point. So it's not quantized, basically. It looks pretty quantized from here, but if we zoom in, you can see that nothing is perfect. Just to make it a bit more human, sometimes I did humanize it with my own self, like coming in and being like, no, this one needs to move a tiny bit or whatever. But for the most part, that was I basically just used that. Again, sometimes I did the other way. But humanizing is super, super important, both for timing and for velocity. The second one was this. As you can't hear, I rendered out each of the different mics so that I could process each of these individually the same way that you would an actual drummer. No one does this. They're going to just affect this one and do stuff on here. But that's not how you process drums, and so it's not going to sound real, or it's just going to sound worse. Which is why I did individual processing on all of these, so that it would be like, you know, I'm not playing the drums, I've got someone else to play them, and I'm here mixing them, basically. So I'm just going to go through my thought process on how I mixed all these. So the first thing is obviously a EQ, looking at kick. Cut off a bit of the low end, because you can't hear it, and it's going to muffle off the sound. This part here, I wish I could show you, is where the kick beats into the drum. So it's that, like, it's just a bad sound. It's going to be around here on any drum, because they're all about the same, but you're going to have to work that out yourself. But that sounds really ugly. And then up here, up here is the transient. That's the, like, actually kick slapping into the drum and getting that high clicking sound. In metal, we really like that. So we wanted to bring that out so you could actually really hear it. That's basically it for the frequency. Then I used a bunch of compression. So this is the first compressor. This is the H comp. I really like H comp because it's got this thing, the punch, which I think is just like attack, kind of. And the ratio, it was pretty high, the compression on here, to make everything really come through, because, like I said, I humanized it. So these kicks are a bit wacky. Like, they all sound very different. So I wanted to compress them so they are volume-wise the same, but to a human ear, they're notably not the same sound. It's not the same, like, every time. It's like, as if someone was actually going with their feet, sort of thing. They're never going to keep it that consistent, unless you're, you know, this guy. Then I just have another compressor. I really like this one. It's just really nice compressor. It just has a good sound. I wish I could show you sort of how it compresses it, but I obviously can't because I have no audio files left. And then finally, decapitator. That's a saturation thing. Normally I actually just go on A, but this one I found that E was a bit nicer. It's actually got quite a big drive. And then I've done a little bit here, but for the most part, it's just a little bit of saturation to try and bring it up and, like, sort of, without changing the volume, keep it prominent in the sound. So next we've got the snare. So again, the first thing with the snare is always, with anything, is going to be frequency. You want to EQ out the bad frequencies or the things that you don't need before you start adding effects to it, because it's going to be much harder to get rid of that. Start with that, just a little bit here and a little bit down there. I'm not exactly sure what it was. That's the, like, the nice sound that I wanted. And this is probably just a little bit of ringing or a little bit of stick hitting the skin. That isn't really a nice sound, so I just wanted to pull it down a little bit. And again, the snare doesn't go down this low, so I'm just cutting out all of these frequencies that are going to be caught in the mic anyway, just to stop any mess. Again, H comp, the exact same thing. The attack, the punchiness thing was really nice, so that it hits really hard, but then has a really stable sound to it after that initial transient. Same again here, the Poogie Child. And then we put a little bit of studio reverb on it. I use a different reverb every time, but this was just the one that I went to. Mix it at 24%. I found that anything more than like 27% was too much. We just wanted it to sound less dry and sort of feel a little bit more contained. Next, the hi-hats. Really didn't do much here. I just frequency got where I wanted, where I didn't want, and then obviously the nothingness to stop the muddiness. And then Poogie Child. This was really nice for making a really flat layer of those hi-hats. With the hi-hats, I didn't want to transient. I didn't want it to hear the hit and then a little bit. I just wanted a solid sound, and Poogie Child is the best for that. I really like that. Toms. Okay. Again, in the toms. This is that same sound where I don't want. Interestingly enough, it's at the same spot as the snare drum. So it is worth noting where your snare drum's hitting and to try and pull things out just a tiny bit. Like that's, I don't know how much that is. That's 1.9 decibels at the tiniest frequency here. Just so that you're not clogging up where the snare drum's going to be. It's a bit like sidechaining in like EDM music, where you sidechain stuff so it comes down so we can hear that one thing. We're kind of doing the same thing here. It's not sidechained, of course, but we're just pulling out those frequencies where the snare drum's going to hit, so when the snare drum does hit, it's very clear. Same business again here, and then here is again, that's where we're getting that transient, that like clicky sound when the drum hits the oh my god, the stick hits the drum. Next, we've got those two compressors in the same way again. Obviously, every time it's different how much I affect things, but it's the same sort of thing. This one's to get the punchiness and to get that click of the sound, and then this one's to get just a more rounded sound. And again, a little bit of reverb on there. Overheads. So again, we wanted to basically, overheads are left and right overhead and the room mic all into one. Whenever I do my processing, I do it like that anyway, so I may as well just render out the MIDI as that. So here we wanted to boost those highs a little bit, just because that's where we'll get hearing most of those cymbals, and just to sort of give it a bit more color really than volume. Next we've got a big cut down here again, right where that snare is, because the overheads and room are going to have the snare in them. So I basically pulled this down just so that we're hearing more of the actual snare and less of the room snare. And then we've got this huge high pass, which is cutting out all of this low end. That's basically because all of this is really bassy, of course, frequency, but it's the kick, it's the low toms, it's the snare, it's things that we don't want too much of, or they are going to very clearly clog it up. So I didn't want to cut them off completely with just the cut, but I definitely needed to turn them down a lot. So that's what that's there for. And then the cut again is just like get rid of that bassiness. I think I got rid of all the kick because it just clogged things up, and we wanted a tight kick. That was why we were getting the transient and stuff before. So I didn't want the room mic really messing it up. That's why I don't have like a reverb on the kick. Next, so we're going to come down to here to drum bus. Yes. So the overheads are actually feeding into this overheads verb, which has a little bit of reverb on it again, and then some imager to basically give it a bit more width to the sound and really space it out. Note that I did not put imager on the overheads, the actual mics and stuff. I only put it on the overheads reverb bus. You can do that, as it's totally personal preference, but I like this because this gave it that space without weirding out the sound. We still want it to feel like a drum kit, so it needs to be somewhat closed in, but this way it does still space it out without I guess weakening the sound or feeling like it's spaced out or anything. So there's that, and then the drum bus we actually didn't do anything to. Sometimes I do a little bit of compression, sometimes I might add a reverb there, or I might send like one of the other things there, but this time I have not. Cool. All right. So let's move on to the bass then. Again, I cannot play the bass because it is not here. It does not exist. But you can see its inserts. So bass, unlike the guitars, was not a real amp. I just went DI. That's perfect. So we've got a gate, of course, just to cut out some of those low frequencies. Sorry, not low frequencies. Just those low sounds where you don't actually want any sound, basically. We got Poogie Child again. Just to sort of compress it before it does anything, just so we've got a nice thick sound. Because again, as I was saying, the way that we were playing with it, we want to slap down really hard and get that transient. So it's important that we don't have this really loud transient and then nothing else. So this is to sort of even out the sound a little bit. We still want to hear the transient, but it doesn't need to be louder than the sound. Now here, this is my bass amp that I've made. It's just using the bass amp on Cubase, the Steinberg VST amp. So we start with a little bit of an overdrive pedal, just to sort of give it a bit more texture. The amps, we're using this one, the Tweed. Cabinet, again, we're just using the actual one, I think. Or the linked one. Yeah, so it would have been the linked one then, great. No post effects. The microphone positioning, we've got this. And it is showing 50... sorry, it's not even. It's 100% on mic, not line. That's just because the sound was... Again, I wish I could show you, but I can't, so sorry. Again, we've got it sitting at the edge here, not in the middle of the cone. I've got it up nice and close. I couldn't really hear too much of a difference between moving between these two, so I just left it on the middle, because yeah, why not? That's just the normal configuration. And then nothing really here. There is these, but they're not on. It's just that master tune, master volume, which I turned up a little bit. In here, we've got a bit of gain. We don't have too much bass. We've got a little bit of a cut there. And then a bit of mids and lots of highs to get that sound. So that's kind of what I've done there. And then just a bit of compression. G-Comp is the least musical compressor in the world, but it's the best compressor in the world. As in, you set your boundaries, it's all visual, so you can see here, if I could fucking play any sound, you'd see it here, and you just set how much you want to pull it down by, and it pulls it down. So it's not very musical, unlike the Poogie Child and stuff, which has a bit of character to it. That one does not. That one is just a volume thing, and that's all it was. I just wanted to get rid of those transients that I had there and pull it down a little bit. I'll load up another project and show you what I did for the bass solo. Okay, now guitars. First thing to note, again, I wanted to make it sound heavy and thick, so I quad tracked it, which means there's four... which means there's 2 guitars on left and 2 guitars on right. So 4 guitars recorded in total. Then, the guitars weren't sounding super great. So I don't need any of that. I basically have this other track, which was my, like, when I was recording, I recorded into here, and then I reamped into an actual amp. So this is the, like, VST amp that I had when I was in here, and it was kind of bad, but it's like I might even just play you a little bit, just so you can sort of hear it. Alright, very shoddy playing. It's quite cold here, so my hands are freezing. But you can at least hear the tone that I've got there. It's not too bad, and I'll show you how I made it. But it's not super nice. It's quite tinny, which is why I layered it in to the sound. You'll see that like, this is on minus 4.2. These are minus 5.3, but these were much louder, basically, than this sound. Basically, just getting that blend of the two to try and get that rawness of the sound. So in the recorded sounds, we didn't do too much. Had a bit of frequency to drop out this part. This one is fine. This is a little bit of cutting here. That's where the pick makes that like click, 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 click sound when you hit the strings, basically, with distortion. So that's what I'm cutting out there. We got a lot of that sound, which is why in the intro here, where it's just guitar, I wanted this to really cut it out so no one heard that sound or heard less of that sound. But there's a lot of good frequencies here that we want in our sound. So as soon as the intro was done and more instruments got layered in, like drums and vocals got really big and stuff, as soon as that happened, we bypass it. Super important, which is why the start of the album sounds a bit more tinny than the rest, but it was a small price to pay to reduce that click, 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 click sort of sound that you get. And then, yeah, G-Comp again. Not friendly compressor. All it does is compress it, which is perfect. So that's basically the same on all of these. And then we'll have a look at this one. So again, we started with a gate. We didn't use a gate here just because we had the gate on whilst I was reamping. I turned everything else off, of course, except for the wah, because I didn't want to get an actual wah pedal. So I kept the gate on, so all the sounds, literally nothing would be coming through, which is why I didn't mind that, you know. Yeah, so then we've got this, another gate. That I'm not really sure about why I have. Oh, I could have. No, I have no idea why I have that. No, absolutely no idea. I've got two gates for some reason. Cool. I've got tube compressor. So this is a bit of like a it's, again, I really don't like this compressor, but it can do some stuff well. So it basically warms up the sound as well as sort of it does a bit of compressing, of course, but it's more of like a warming up the sound. It's a bit of a nice tone before we actually put any distortion on it. So next is Guitar Rig 5. This is the little amp I made. It's got a tube screamer here. This is like the Ibanez tube screamer. Of course, it's not as good, but I don't have one, so, you know. A little bit of that just to sort of really kick it up. Then we've got this amp head with these effects. But I didn't use the cab with it. I didn't like the cab. I thought it was just too tinny and gross. So instead, I went to Ignite amps and used one of their cabs. I used this one on the impulses. It was just much nicer. It had a much better sound. I can even if we sort of go to here again, we'll put this in the middle. If we go here and we get rid of that and have this one on, you can hear that sound. Which is okay, but this one, it's a bit, I just liked it better. It was a bit more, you know, this is very bright, basically. Whereas this one, I just prefer the sound a little bit more. So the cab is obviously the most important part, probably more important than this. So if you don't like the cabs that come with Guitar Rig, definitely go to just Ignite amps, and most of the stuff's free there. Again, G-Comp, you know why, and then a bit of frequency afterwards. I didn't do this beforehand because it wasn't so important. I probably could have put a little bit of this on beforehand just to cut out those low frequencies that might be there, but there really isn't that much on guitar because it doesn't make those frequencies. So it'd only be a bit of cable buzz or whatever. So it's not too big of an issue to just cut it out afterwards. And again, same thing here. We want to cut where that pick makes it sound, and we want to do a little bit of a dip there, just because I didn't really like that sound. Great. So when it comes to the leads and the solos, I didn't use any of the DI amp. I only used the actual amp because it sounded so much nicer. The lead sound just was perfect. It was exactly what I was after. So again, a bit of frequency here, just cutting out that low end. These ones won't matter too much, and because we're playing in that higher register anyway, we don't want to cut out those frequencies. You know why? Been over this. This one is another just compressor that sort of gives it a bit of character with it. And just had a bit of a nice character, a bit nicer than some of those other ones, to sort of fatten up the sound. Next we've got this, the ping pong delay, just to sort of not make it so boring, I guess. If there was no effects or anything and it was just that lead sound, it wouldn't really cut through, but we put these effects on and it sort of catches the ear and it just sounds a bit nicer. And then some H reverb. I really love this reverb. It's just really nice. This is actually sitting on default setting that I've just sort of mixed around a little bit. It's mostly dry. What's that? 10% dry. Or sorry, 10% wet, I suppose. 90% dry. Yeah. That's just cuts off pretty quickly, builds up a little bit. That's it. It's a very visual amp reverb, so you can understand that. And that's basically the processing for all of them. Each song had its own processing, but the chain was basically the same, and the plugins were basically the same. And finally, the vocals, which again I cannot show you. So we've got a lot of automation here. Some things like the black hole coming in to sort of like this is the wet mix to sort of envelop the sound, so it stops being like it's still a dry sound with some reverb. It's not completely dry, but we're going from that to just complete reverb, just like fade off into the nothingness sort of thing. So these tracks all 5 of these run to the vocal bus, which is where I actually did the processing. These don't actually have any processing except for those little sound effects like adding that reverb on there. So I've got two. We've got the clean vocals at the start and then the screaming vocals. So clean vocals, we've got this just to de-esser basically. We got Poogie Child again, you know why. We got Arvox, which is just a really, really nice vocal compressor by Waves. It's one thing. All you do is pull this around. That's it. Yeah. But it's just such a warm sound that you've got, and all you've got to do is pull that down and you're done. So it's amazing. And then some H comp. Not to get the punchiness. The punchiness is off here. I just like the sound of this one. I tried a couple different ones, and this one just worked best for me. So that's the one I stuck with. The screaming vocals, again, the frequency to cut this out. I did add a boost here. And that was just to get a little bit of the color, basically, into the voice. Poogie Child, Arvox, and Arvox again. The 2 is more important than one big one. Basically, the 2, and you can use this for any kind of compression, don't over compress the first one, or like, you know, if you wanted to compress by like 20 decibels, basically, it's probably better to compress by 10 and then get another compressor to compress by 10. Because the way that the compressor works is it says, oh, you're this much over, so we're going to pull it down by this much, basically. Whereas this one's, if you do the 2 at once, it's going to say, oh, we're only up this much, so we're going to pull it down a little bit. And then this one goes, okay, we're up this much, we're going to pull it down a little bit. And it's a bit smoother. So I really support the use of 2 instead of 1. Just one that's just like all the way down here sort of thing. It's just, again, a bit smoother sound, cool little technique. That is basically everything. We got a bit of reverb on the leads. So those are the leads, not the solo. And the leads are basically the same. I didn't go over them, but yeah, I mean, that's just actually reverb on that one. But yeah, anyway, look at this. This is what I lost. Everything. So many things just gone because of a fucking update. I'm so angry. So yeah, now it's just big old nothingness everywhere. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was the bass solo, basically. So it's the exact same signal chain as a bass. I just added a little bit of saturation. I use this saturation knob, which straight up sucks. It's like, it's really good for sound design, but for sounding pretty, it is not pretty. It is a very gross sound. So, but it just worked well. If you listen to the bass in the solo in this song, it's not nice, but we wanted that like buzziness and that upfront center. So instead of using like a fuzz or a distortion or something, I went with saturation, and used this one. I went on natural, so I didn't keep anything. You can only keep the highs or the lows, and I didn't want that. I wanted just the buzziness of this sound. It wasn't turned up too high either. See where it is. It was just enough that it just gave a little bit of that clipping sound, I guess. Subtle clipping sound. Okay. Ooh, we can show you some of the acoustic guitar too, but I don't think there's too much in it. Where are you at? Acoustic. So we got H comp. Again, just a nice compressor, not for the punchiness this time. Pulling down here, of course. Pulling down where that pick is, and I guess that's probably the sound that you get from moving your hand around on acoustic guitars. And then a little bit of reverb. I went with this one this time. Just sounded nice. And all the way down here, nothing. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I hope that helps. Check out the album if you like metal music. Yeah, catch you around.